The anime begins with Haruki Nakano, an ordinary high school boy who lives with his 4 sisters. One morning, his alarm wakes him up after he falls asleep helping his younger sister Yaoi study. At some point, Yuzuki and Satsuki, the younger sisters, enter his room and ask him to help wake Yaoi. To wake her up, they start tickling Haruki, and in the process, he accidentally touches Yaoi, which wakes her up. Yaoi gets annoyed and slaps his miserable ass. Just then, Matsuki, the oldest sister, walks in and scolds both Yaoi and Haruki for making too much noise. To stop the fight, Matsuki threatens to call their mother, making them instantly behave since they're afraid of losing their allowance. Afterward, Haruki is getting ready in the bathroom to head out, while his annoying little sisters argue with him to let them use it first. In the end, all 4 siblings leave the house, heading to their respective schools. One night, Haruki is watching a horror movie when he notices a pair of eyes peeking through his door, scaring him. Later on, while Yaoi is changing, Haruki sees the same eyes again. When he checks the door, he realizes it's Yuzuki and Satsuki spying on him. The girls explain that they are working on a school project about their family, where they have to describe each relative. At that moment, Matsuki arrives and insists they do their homework properly. Once they finish, they read their descriptions aloud. They start with Haruki, saying he is the only boy in the family, a try-hard gamer, non-athletic, and a scrawny weak man who is easily scared of anything. Next, they talk about Yaoi, pointing out that she is good at sports. Finally, they describe Matsuki as a perfect role model, smart, athletic, and responsible, and that she has a good figure as well. Later that day, the girls return from school excited and tell Haruki that they got the highest grade on their assignment. After school one day, Haruki returns home and finds Matsuki asleep in her bed, wearing only her uniform top and skirt. He tries to wake her but fails, so he decides to leave just as the other sisters arrive. At that moment, Matsuki wakes up, still in her uniform, and one of her stockings is noticeably slipping down. Haruki rushes over to help fix it, but Yaoi misunderstands the situation and hits him. Later, Matsuki goes to take a shower, and Haruki hands her a towel, recalling an earlier incident where she forgot her underwear and sent him to retrieve it, only for Yaoi to catch him, earning him another slap. Later that evening, Haruki returns to his room to find Matsuki lying on his bed, reading a magazine and wrapped only in the towel he gave her. When he complains, she tells him that getting dressed right after a shower feels uncomfortable, so she plans to stay like that for a bit, but ends up falling asleep instead. One day, the whole family goes grocery shopping. At the store, Yaoi suggests starting with rice, and while Haruki agrees reluctantly, he struggles to carry it but decides to manage anyway. Meanwhile, Matsuki and the younger girls are drawn to some free samples, approaching the stall with innocent, eager looks to get their share. Matsuki apologizes for their behavior but ends up trying the samples herself. They continue visiting various stalls, sampling everything on offer, and one of the vendors gives them a few things as a gift. As they finish browsing, they realize they still need to buy curry. Although Haruki prefers spicy curry, they decide on a mild one so the girls can enjoy it without any trouble. Back at home, they prepare dinner, and though the girls worry it might be too spicy, they're pleasantly surprised to find it's mild and enjoy the meal without issue. On another day, Satsuki waits eagerly for Haruki to come home. When he arrives, she hands him a manga they both enjoy. Haruki offers to let her read it first or suggests they read it together, but she declines, and he accepts her choice. Later, he runs into Yuzuki and asks if she's planning to read the manga, but she says she won't understand it. Haruki then playfully asks Yuzuki to tease Satsuki a little, but Yuzuki corrects him, reminding him that their teacher taught them not to do bad things, while clipping clothespins into his hair. In the end, Satsuki finishes reading, and the two girls head outside to play. Later, Satsuki decides to go back inside, and when they do, they turn on the TV just in time for their favorite anime. Haruki warns her to move back from the screen a bit, but she ignores him. Yuzuki adds that Satsuki knows exactly when her favorite anime will air without needing to check the time. When the anime finishes, the girls go to Satsuki's room to play, and they have fun together. Satsuki comments that promises are very important to her. By the end of the day, she's still watching anime, while Haruki grows bored and asks Yuzuki if it bothers her that Satsuki ignores him. Yuzuki replies that she wouldn't do anything Satsuki doesn't want to do. A few days before exams, a stressed out Haruki walks into his room, where he finds Matsuki lying on his bed in a rather odd sussy pose. She offers to teach him everything, but Haruki's horny ass, misinterpreting her words with a double meaning, insists he can study on his own. However, later Yaoi is studying in her own room, and she seizes the moment to ask Haruki to teach her since she thinks he's a good teacher. Haruki agrees, but it quickly becomes clear that Yaoi isn't following anything he explains. Haruki reviews his old exams and discovers that Yaoi struggles with multiplication. He decides that she should write out all the times tables on paper to practice where she's failing. Just then, the younger girls come by to say goodnight and wish Yaoi luck on her exam. To make things worse, they cheerfully tell Haruki that they scored top marks on their math test, which only makes Yaoi feel more discouraged. The next day, Yaoi returns home and tries to avoid Haruki when he asks how her exam went. As she tries to slip away, Haruki stops her, but in the process, they both stumble, and Haruki ends up falling on top of her. One day at home, the little girls are in their swimsuits. They explain that they have swimming class that day, which sparks Yaoi's interest. She seizes the moment to tell Matsuki that she really wants to go to the beach, but Matsuki explains that it's not the right season for that. Despite this, Yaoi comes up with a clever idea. Later, when Haruki arrives home, he immediately feels the heat. As he walks in, he is taken aback to see his sisters in swimsuits. Misunderstanding the situation, Yaoi hits him and calls him a pervert, using this chance to scold him for not taking her to the beach last year because he had entrance exams. Haruki promises they can go this summer, but Yaoi reminds him that now it's her turn for exams. After this, Haruki heads to his room, but Yaoi throws her swimsuit at him, insisting he change so they can go outside. Later, the girls decide to inflate a pool they used when they were younger. However, when they try it out, they realize they've grown too much for it to fit comfortably. Nevertheless, they find ways to enjoy themselves in the small pool. They barely fit in the pool, but they still do it anyways. As evening falls, the little girls return home, shivering from the cold. One day, Satsuki is reading a manga about a pair of twins who don't look anything alike. The story shows how, since the twins don't resemble each other, they begin to believe they might not actually be sisters at all. As she's reading, Yuzuki walks in and overhears the plot. Suddenly, Haruki walks into the room and immediately notices that both of his sisters are looking unusually sad. And Satsuki tells him about the manga, then nervously asks if he thinks she might be adopted. To reassure her, Haruki pulls out an old childhood picture of Matsuki, where she looks almost identical to how Satsuki looks now. However, Yuzuki starts to feel doubtful. She notices that Haruki looks a lot like their father, Yaoi resembles their mother, and Satsuki and Matsuki share clear similarities with each other. But Yuzuki can't figure out who in the family she looks like. Feeling determined to solve the mystery, Yuzuki heads to their parents' room, determined to search for proof that she belongs in the family. Matsuki, noticing Yuzuki's growing curiosity, she pulls out an old family album and shows Yuzuki a picture of their grandmother, who looks almost exactly like her. Just as Yuzuki begins to feel reassured, Yaoi enters the room with a frustrated expression on her face. She looks upset and tells her sisters that her grades are low again, despite her best efforts. Yaoi goes on to say that all of her siblings are good at school and excel in different subjects, except for her. This leads her to suggesting that she might be the one who's adopted because she struggles with math, unlike everyone else. The next day, Yuzuki suddenly runs up to Haruki and surprises him by trying to hug him in an unexpected and overly enthusiastic way. Satsuki arrives and sees the strange interaction between them. Later that evening, during dinner, Yuzuki chooses to sit right next to Haruki, which immediately makes him suspicious. He starts to wonder if Yuzuki is up to something and whether she might have put something in his food as a prank. To his surprise, nothing seems wrong. His food is perfectly fine. After dinner, Haruki heads to his room to rest for the night. However, when he opens the door, he's surprised to find Yuzuki already waiting for him there. She doesn't explain why she's in his room, but instead asks him if he can read her a bedtime story before she goes to sleep. Haruki agrees, still a bit confused by her strange behavior throughout the day. While they talk, Yuzuki suddenly tells Haruki that she loves him, catching him completely off guard. Just then, Satsuki walks into the room. She shows Haruki the anime she had been watching the previous day, where there is a scene of a girl who plays a joke on her brother by pretending to have feelings for him. Satsuki explains that Yuzuki was probably just copying that scene and playing a similar prank on Haruki. The next day, Yuzuki admits that she was indeed joking and was only trying to see how he would react to her playful behavior. One night, Haruki suddenly wakes up to find Matsuki lying on top of him. Startled and confused, he asks her why they are in such a strange and awkward situation. She goes on to explain that at her school, they are currently preparing for a play, and no one wanted to take on the role of the princess, so she volunteered. However, there is a particular scene in the play where the princess has to kiss the prince, and Matsuki admits that she has never kissed anyone before. She confesses that she doesn't know how to convincingly fake the kiss, which is why she came to him for help. Matsuki nervously asks Haruki if they can practice the scene together so that she can figure out how to make it look real on stage. As they are about to practice the kiss, Haruki suddenly snaps out of it and realizes the awkwardness of the situation. He quickly pushes Matsuki away and reminds her that they are siblings and can't do something like this. Matsuki goes silent, clearly embarrassed by the rejection. She rushes out of the room without saying anything. When he finds her, Matsuki is holding the play's script in her hand. She turns around and, with a slightly embarrassed smile, explains that she actually got the roles mixed up. It turns out that there isn't even a kiss scene in the play after all, which explains her earlier confusion. One night, Haruki finds himself lying outside Yaoi's bedroom door. Feeling unwell and too weak to make it back to his own room, he calls out to her for help. Yaoi notices him and takes him into her room, concerned about his condition. Haruki, despite his illness, tells her that she should go to bed since she has school the next day. The following morning, at breakfast, all the sisters gather in the dining room. The youngest one asks where Haruki is and how he's doing. Yaoi explains that he's sick and is staying in his room. Meanwhile, in his room, Haruki is struggling. He desperately needs to use the bathroom but is too weak to move. Eventually, he falls asleep before he can get up. When he wakes up, he finds Yaoi by his side, taking care of him. Haruki thanks Yaoi for coming back to help him. She tries to care for him by herself, and as she's wiping the sweat from his body and taking off his shirt, the rest of the sisters suddenly walk in. They see Haruki and Yaoi in what looks like a compromising situation, which leads to a lot of teasing and misunderstandings. One night, the sisters are all watching a terrifying horror movie while Haruki is busy playing video games. Out of nowhere, Yaoi says that she wants to sleep in Haruki's room. Haruki, thinking that she might be feeling sick, decides to take her there to make sure she's okay. On their way, they run into their two younger sisters, who are heading to the bathroom. The little sisters ask Haruki to wait for them while they're inside. At first, Haruki refuses, but when the little ones start crying, he has no choice but to agree. After dealing with his younger sisters, Haruki finally returns to his room. To his surprise, he finds Matsuki already asleep in his bed. When he tries to wake her up, she instinctively hugs him in her sleep. At that very moment, the other sisters enter the room and decide that they all want to sleep in his room for the night as well. Haruki, unable to protest, watches as they all settle down on the floor to sleep. As they all drift off, Haruki realizes that he doesn't mind everyone sleeping together like this every once in a while. The next morning, Haruki tells his sisters that they can always count on him, but they just laugh and ignore his offer. They joke that they should avoid watching scary movies for a while, which explains why they all decided to sleep with him in the first place.